Okay, hello. You might need to start over.
Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. I thought I was talking to everybody, but I was only talking to our team. Anyway, sorry about that. Sorry for the delay. My name is Robin McMillan. I'm the Innovator of Projects, Programs, and Partnerships at the Canadian Child Care Federation. And I'm joined here tonight by my colleague Suzanne Schlechte, who is also from the Federation, and our two experts, Gina and Kim, who will introduce themselves in a moment. Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry about that delay. So basically, we're going to run our webinars similar to how we did last week if you were here joining us then, and thank you for coming back if you were. And if not, it's quite all right. This is all standalone content, so you won't be lost. This is wonderful that you're with us tonight. So Suzanne, I will turn it over to you, if you don't mind, to introduce our land acknowledgement and say hello, and then pass it over to our experts. So good evening.
Thank you, Robin. We respectfully acknowledge that the land on which the CCCF is located is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabeg people. We recognize all Indigenous people who were here before us, those who live with us now, and the 7 generations to come. As Indigenous people have done since time immemorial, we strive to be responsible stewards of the land and to respect the cultures, ceremonies, and traditions of all who call it home. As we open our hearts and minds to the past, we commit ourselves to working in a spirit of truth and reconciliation to make a better future for all. Today, these lands continue to be shared territory and are occupied by many diverse peoples from near and far. A treaty is an inheritance, a responsibility, and a relationship. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Gina and Kimberly, welcome, and really looking forward to your presentation tonight.
Thank you. I'm so glad we're here. I'm glad to be back, and Kim will introduce herself in a minute. I'm glad she's here. I hope she's glad she's here. Thank you for that beautiful land acknowledgement. And I just want to acknowledge that Kim and I are both coming from Treaty 6 in Alberta. Ours is not unceded territory, unfortunately. Fortunately or unfortunately, I think unfortunately in the way that the treaties were actually lived out for so long. But we acknowledge that these treaties were signed originally with the intent of peace and friendship and sharing. And that's the mindset and the approach that we are bringing here tonight in this digital space that we are hoping to share along with you and share stories and experiences together. So my name is Gina, for those who weren't here last week or like me, just are really forgetful with names and need to see them often before they stick. I am the professional learning lead at GRIT, and so I make a lot of workshops, I facilitate a lot of workshops, and really love to see people think about inclusion in early childhood in new ways while at the same time affirming some of their strengths in the content. I'm joined today by Kim, who I'll let introduce herself.
Perfect. Thanks, Gina. Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Murphy. I am a behavior consultant with GRIT. I have spent my whole career working with children with diverse needs and their families. I've worked in homes supporting parents. I've worked in schools supporting teachers and support staff. And at GRIT, I get to go into child care centers and support the early learning educators. So I'm very passionate about inclusion. So I'm very excited to be here today. Thank you.
Yes, it's been a minute since I've been in those settings as well, but it's nice to do some of these workshops where I get to remember the days where, yeah, working directly with educators and children and families. So as with all of our workshops, we like to just sort of set the stage with some just brief group guidelines so that everybody feels that this is a space where they can share and feel comfortable and engaged in their learning. There's no official break. It's a quick 1-hour workshop, but certainly if you need to go get more water or use the bathroom or whatnot, especially if you have earbuds in, take us with you and do what you need to do to respect your body's needs and take care of yourself for your learning. Do try to reduce distractions around you, maybe close the door to the room, turn your phone on silent, whatever you need to do. And we are exploring the topic of inclusion, and so it can be a sensitive topic, and it might be uncomfortable. It might trigger some uncomfortable experiences or memories. And so I want to let you know, if you do experience this, do take a break. That's just fine. We're normal, we're human, we're going to have emotions around some of the things that we see ourselves in or not, or that we remember. But feel free to reach out to a trusted friend or family member as well, or send a direct message to us in the chat as the facilitator, and we can try and co-regulate or answer any of your questions. I want to kind of quickly go through what we're learning this evening and then actually circle back to something important from last week. So this evening, we are just going to very briefly review, like, why inclusion. Many of us may kind of have an understanding of the why, that's why we're here, but just to kind of review that. We are going to spend most of the evening reviewing and investigating inclusive practices that you can use right in your room or your day home or wherever you are to support children's participation. And then we're going to spend the last little bit exploring a tool that you can use to really analyze, maybe there is a child or two who might need some like individualized supports that you recognize, you know, they need that. And so how can you start to honor those needs in your scope of practice? Now, I want to acknowledge something that was really important from last week that was brought to me. I hope it's okay if this person is here. This feedback was shared with me, but I think it's so meaningful and important, and it's something that we're holding kind of dual realities here, kind of a both and. And there was a lovely lady who emailed, and the feedback was, you know, workshop is great, but this educator had witnessed some experiences in a school that she with a child that she was supporting around seclusion rooms being used on a child that she was working with. And for those who don't know what a seclusion room is, it's a small room where children who are having a meltdown or engaging in challenging behavior might be sent to, quote unquote, calm down or for a time out. But the way that they're used across Canada is really a form of punishment. It's not best practice. It's like an isolation room. It doesn't produce long-term behavior change. It's fairly shame-based, and it's not trauma-informed at all, which we know is so important for children's sense of safety and security. As adults, we might feel a temporary sense of safety if a child is engaging in extreme challenging behavior, but in the long term, it's just removing that child's physical and emotional safety. So, and it also sends the message to other children that their peer is scary and dangerous, which doesn't support inclusion. So it's a heartbreaking and really grim reality that does exist. They're still legal in Canada. And so this participant was like, how can we even do a workshop on inclusion when this is still happening? And I've been there. I'd say, you know, a few times a year, I wonder, like, are we even making any difference? But I think because things like seclusion rooms exist is exactly why we need workshops on inclusion. We need to have an awareness across, you know, all staff in an organization or everyone we work with, you know, about the evolution of inclusion we talked about. So we need to bring that awareness forward. And then knowing that a lot of people who are here already do value inclusion and are trying to not engage in these heartbreaking practices, for us, it's a reminder of the importance of advocacy as well, right? Sometimes inclusion, it means standing up for the children that we serve. And we might need to advocate to our directors or our family child care agency, administration in a school, to our provincial and federal ministries. You know, we might find that that's a role that we have to play in either writing letters or joining rallies if it comes to that, but speaking out and considering inclusion in the way we vote in municipal and provincial and federal elections. So there's that too. Certainly, if you work in an organization that says they are trauma informed and inclusive, but they use seclusion rooms, you have every right to question that, right? Or any other non-inclusive practices, right? So I just want to acknowledge that because we recognize it is a reality in Canada, unfortunately. Robin, I might send you some follow-up from, there's an inclusion advocacy organization in Canada that has a statement that I might send if people are wondering and wanting to kind of learn more from an advocacy perspective. And so I want to recognize that hopefully this workshop will bring hope, because part of inclusion means having the skills that we need to do inclusion well. So in an hour, we can't cover everything under the sun, but hopefully this will give you a starting point to think, okay, what's my next right step? With that, let's review why we're here, right? And reminder that this workshop, inclusion covers all of the intersections, but we are focusing specifically on disability and neurodivergence in this series. And so inclusion is a human right, and this is the message we are trying to demonstrate in our practice and also share with other educators, families, and higher level administration. So it's not just having a child with a disability in your early learning setting, but it's also about providing the right supports for that child and all children in that setting to be able to participate, right? And so the practices we have come from our values and beliefs. If you were here that last week, that's why we spent last week talking about inclusion as a value, because we need to have that value so strong in our minds that the practices, we can do them even on the days when it feels tough. And because inclusion is also not just something we do, right? We're going to put a lot of practices in place and we'll talk about those, but when it comes down to it, it's a way of being. So our values guide our practice, and this is kind of why we're here. So we're going to jump right in. Kim, I can't remember what the halfway point is, so you'll have to remind me in the chat so I don't take over your slides. I kind of have a bad habit.
All good.
So let's get started with inclusive practices and the meat and potatoes, probably like what you've been waiting for. And I kind of want to set the stage with this comic. I love how this guy's shoveling. This is a very Canadian scene. Shoveling the snow off the stairs, and this child in the wheelchair is like, hey, could you please shovel the ramp? And he's like, well, all the other students are waiting to use the stairs. And when I finish shoveling the stairs, then I'll clear the ramp. And he's like, well, if you shovel the ramp, we could all get in. And so I think this really drives home the point that often what children with disabilities or children with any sort of neurodivergence need are good learning tools and practices for all children. And you can see this teacher, he's not dismissing. He's like, no, I'm not going to shovel this for you, but he doesn't realize that, wait, if I do it this one way, I can save some energy and make it good for everybody. So as we set the stage, I want to remind us that what's good for one is good for all. We're going to really be talking about what we call universal practices, which means that they're things that we're going to do for all children. Everything we talk about are things you will do with all children. You might need to tweak them for an individual child, but when we have these in place, it helps us better identify what are those really individualized, specialized supports a child might need. And it also makes a more seamless inclusion environment because it's not isolating children in pull out, right? We talked about that last week. So what's good for one is good for all. And some of these things on the slide, these are inventions that most of us use. I use every single one of these. I have no disability. I'm able-bodied, but I use every one of these, and all of them were originally developed for people with disabilities. So texting was created for the deaf so that they could use cell phones, electric toothbrushes for people with the fine motor impairments, speech to text for people who have limited arm and hand use, audiobooks for visual impairments, curb cuts for wheelchair users, which anyone with a stroller or a scooter or a bike will use, right? These have become universally beneficial. So again, we're going to be talking about universal practices in a way, and we're going to be referring to all children that at the same time, they will actually address most of the needs of children with disabilities. Statistically, only 5% of children really need highly individualized or intense interventions. Like we're talking behavior plans, a one-on-one aid full-time. And so by putting universal practices in place, you will better be able to determine who are the children who are actually in that 5%. This is sort of around the teaching to diversity piece, right? We get these good practices in place for all children, and it helps us see where those diversities need our extra support. So where do we start? We're going to start with connection, because inclusion happens where children feel a sense of belonging. And with this workshop, I'm going to ask you some to share your thoughts and ideas in the chat. You can put thoughts and ideas in the chat at any point in time this evening. Anything that Kim or I say that sparks an idea for you, or if it brings up a question, add it to the question. We can see them this week. But just so you know, you can share your thoughts at any time as Kim and I are chatting. So inclusion requires belonging, and belonging happens in relationship when we connect with others. So I want you to start by thinking individually of a child currently in your care that you really find it easy to connect with. It's just you look forward to seeing them every day. It's really easy to connect with them. And feel free to share in the chat what makes this relationship go so well. Like what did you do maybe to start this relationship in the first place? What do they do that makes it so easy to connect with them? What does the child do to let you know that you have a positive relationship with them? Feel free to share your thoughts to that in the chat. It's going to flow fast, I bet, but we will try and acknowledge some of those responses. What makes it so easy to connect with some children? I know while people are typing, I'll share an example. I know the kids that would just naturally, they're just naturally social, right? They come up to you and they're like, want to play? Look at this. Like they're just naturally more extroverted. It's just really easy to connect with kids who want to connect with you. They're obviously showing an interest with you, right? I see people responding in the question panel. I don't know if you don't have access to the chat, but we'll try and look at it there too. Yeah, naturally social, they like the same thing. So shared interests, absolutely, right? Absolutely. What else? Smiling, yeah, the body language, right? They're just open.
I'm trying to look through some of these as well.
Oh, I'm going to undock it. If I undock it from the panel, I can see it better. A good sense of humor, they're outgoing. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, the chat doesn't seem to be accessible, so we're going to let Robin work on that in the background. But they're showing affection, absolutely. And like it's heartwarming, right? These are the kids we look forward to, and they're the ones that just, they have it easy with social relationships. So now I want you to think of a child that you have more difficulty connecting with. And you don't need to share this time, though certainly if you'd like to share in the chat, you can, but I know this is a bit more of a vulnerable question. I want you to think of like, what are the barriers that kind of keep this relationship from going deeper? Just think about that to yourself, like, what is it? And if you're comfortable, you can certainly share in the chat, but you don't have to. This is more for your individual reflection. I know for myself, like there's some kids, like one of my friends has 2 kids. I love them both. They're great kids. One of them just is naturally a bit more surly and sarcastic than the other. And I find that child is a little bit harder to connect with. Like I'm not seeking them out, like they're up gaming in their room, great. I'll connect with their sibling who's just far more with the smiles and the humor, right? So I know like the attitude really makes a difference, like when they feel prickly emotionally, right? Yeah. A deeply feeling child, yes. Sometimes when those children wear their hearts on their sleeves, you're like, great, you know exactly how they're feeling, but how do I know how to respond and how to connect with them in a way that, you know, builds their heart instead of breaks it, right? Strong words, strong language, absolutely. Yeah, kids who push our hot buttons, great tie-in to last week, absolutely. Yes, the kids who push our hot buttons really easily, you know, we all have different hot buttons, and so if the child figures out what ours is and pushes it, whew, right? That absolutely is going to make it hard to want to connect. Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing. Now, the thing is, often the children who feel the hardest to connect with are the ones who need our connection the most. It seems counterintuitive, but the ones who are just like seem to be pushing us away often are the ones that need us the most. And it's us who has to change our practice. So these children are 2 and 3 and 4 years old. They're not going to be able to necessarily just change like their attitude or their mindset or some of the things about them. We have to help them learn new ways to interact. And so what I want you to do is just for a minute, and this is in your handout as well, but I want you to think of that child who's hard to connect with and just think of what's one step. And you might answer this question as we go through this workshop. It might come to you as we go. But what's one step you could take with that particular child to begin making more positive connections more often? You don't have to be perfect. It's sometimes it's hard, right? Especially when our hot buttons are pushed. But think to yourself, how could I just delight in the child, right? Where could I delight with them? Where do we have something in common? Maybe it's just that we're both oldest siblings, right? How can we explore with them in their play, and when can I just be with them? Because the connection is going to lead to that sense of belonging, and it's going to make all of our other practices a little easier when we have that connection with that child, when we are kind of a secure base for that child. We model what belonging looks like to the other children, because chances are if we are having trouble connecting, so are the other children, and so we can be that model for them. I'm not saying it's easy, but start to think about, okay, what's one thing I could do to start connecting with them in a new way? Because that brings back kind of a strength-based approach, which we're going to need when children have disabilities and diverse learning. So we've got our relationships. Inclusion is also an environment of belonging, right? So we've got a belonging in relationships, but also do they feel like they belong in the space around us? And so we want to just make sure that our space is responsive, any learning environment, to the children that are in there. And we can also represent disabilities and diversities that aren't even there, just to help children be aware of them. So some strategies that help us do this are things like just books with diverse characters. I'm so excited to see how many books there are these days about children with autism, or about children with Down syndrome or cerebral palsy, or differences. I could maybe send a book list after, but if you Google books about children with disabilities, Pinterest will give you answers. And so you don't need to even have a child with a disability in your program or in your family child care setting to have books with diverse characters, right? Having a book about a child with autism will help children be more accepting when you get a child with autism, not if, but when. So books with diverse characters, absolutely, such an easy in. And intentional use of visuals. We have a specific slide to talk about that, but help children see what you mean. Oftentimes the things we're asking them to do are very kind of abstract, and visuals make things clearer and easier to understand for children with disabilities, especially developmental or cognitive delays. Obviously, we want to give children choice, and that is a best practice in early learning and care anyway, giving children choice. But choice and voice, it supports belonging and that sense of agency, and it's even more critical, I would say, for children with disabilities where they have less control, right? They may have things being done to their bodies like G-tubes and trachs and leg braces and AFOs and wheelchairs. Like they might be, people are manhandling them a lot, right? So they have less control in the general day. So where we can give them more choice gives them that greater sense of control. Can they choose where to play? Can they choose which materials to use and how to use them? Can they choose how to interact with them in ways that match their abilities as well? So providing extra choice, like thinking even more intentionally about those kinds of things. And then obviously physical accessibility within that, right? Is there enough room for those with mobility concerns to move around your space, right? Is your family childcare space downstairs? And if so, okay, how can you get creative to support all children and families to access it, right? It's probably impractical to put an elevator in your house. But if you had a child in a wheelchair and they were in your neighborhood and you are the choice family childcare program, how can we help that child get up and down the stairs every day? How can we get creative? So there's some outside of the box thinking, but looking at that physical accessibility too, to reduce a lot of frustration. And then how do we provide balance so that we're teaching to that diversity that we talked about last week with the evolution of inclusion? Everybody has different needs. And so how do we do that with a group of children? We provide balance and options so that children can receive what they need when they need it in their learning and their play. So we have active times in the day and quiet times. We have child-led activities for most, but we also might have some adult-led activities where we can really use teachable moments to support children's learning. We might have areas that really support group play, but also some areas where children can play on their own. some children need those breaks from other people, are introverts, not exclusive places, but just quieter spaces that children can do things on their own. And then obviously indoor and outdoor. So we're meeting all of the children's needs by the flow that we have going through our day. All right, I think you're picking up here, aren't you, Kim?
I am, yes.
All right, tell us more about visuals.
Perfect. I love visuals. So visual supports or visuals, these are things that obviously we can see, and it gives us information. It helps support communication and understanding, and it really does support everybody. Even as adults, we are using visuals, right? We are using Google Maps, we're using calendars, alarm clocks, to-do lists. You go to a restaurant, even if it's the restaurant you go to every Friday night, you are looking at the signs on the bathrooms to make sure you are entering the one that suits you. So we all use visuals. It helps us to engage with our environment. And it is crucial for successful inclusion. I hear a lot of people say, oh, they know the routine, but there are times that we are dysregulated and we can't remember. Does anybody else look for the speed limit signs, even though it's the same road you go home every day? If we're not feeling well, if there's a new child that's coming into your program, a child who doesn't speak or understand much English, the pictures are going to support everybody. And there's ways to individualize that. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but the visuals allow children that sense of predictability. They know what's going to happen. That supports their feeling safe, reduces that anxiety. They feel secure. They also are then able to practice being a little bit more flexible. So if a routine is going to change, so maybe you were going to go outside and all of a sudden it's pouring rain, maybe you're not going outside anymore. So switching the picture on that visual schedule to show so that that understanding is there. Oh, we can't go outside anymore, but we're going to do this thing instead inside. Supports all that, those changes, because things happen, right? So as I mentioned, you can individualize these visual supports, and there's so many ways you can do that. So there are sometimes kids who they don't respond to pictures but need actual objects. Years ago, early in my career, I worked with a family, and that's what this little girl needed. So we were scouring everywhere for miniature toilets and miniature beds and all the things that were in her daily routine at home, because those were the visuals that she responded to. Some kids, it's bigger pictures. Some kids, it's pictures of them in the pictures. So you can use visuals that have a child's first language, because when we're doing visuals, we always want to make sure, just like you can see here on the slide, that there's words, because that's going to help with that literacy piece. So maybe you have the words in that child's home language, what their first language is. Sometimes you might just be showing 2 steps at a time, because seeing the whole routine for the morning is too much. You just have a first then, and you kind of break that down into parts throughout the day. And one of my favorite ways is to really personalize it for those kids with something that they really love. So if there's a certain character that they like, a certain game that they like, tailor it to that so that they are already more interested in looking at it. When I worked in the schools, I was supporting some EAs to make some visuals that were Candyland, the game Candyland themed. So I remember having to look and see what order the colors. I didn't own Candyland at that time. I have a child now, so now I own the game. But I remember having to look online to see, what does the board look like? Because I wanted to get the colors in the right order, because I knew that child would know that. So there's lots of different ways, right? We can have Elsa, we can have Blue from Blue's Clues, right? Putting on their jacket to get ready to go outside. So that's going to increase their motivation to even look at the visuals, because I also hear a lot of people say, well, I show him the visual and he just turns away. So sometimes we just have to get creative, but we know that kids, they like creativity and they like fun. So if you can have fun with it, and how you're going to present that, that's already half the battle. So
Yes, and sometimes it does take a minute, right? You can be like,
Yep.
oh, I showed them for a week and they didn't learn, they weren't responsive. Like their brains are just developing, so they might need to get used to them too.
Absolutely. So especially if they're not used to having visual supports that way. So you really are teaching them, what is this thing and how do I attend to this? So inclusion is also supporting those transitions. Transitions are so hard for kids. I feel like they're hard for everybody in different ways, right? And for kids especially, there are so many transitions in their day, and almost all of them are not guided by them, right? They are told what to do in some capacity, when to do it. So it can be really hard, especially if you are doing something fun or preferred, and then you have to stop that thing. So in the chat, or I guess the questions,
Q&A, yeah.
yeah, we just love to hear how you guys are supporting children through transitions. So we'll take a couple minutes just to pop in your answers. How are you supporting kids through transitions? And then we will just expand on that.
Yeah, what are some things you're already doing? And I don't know about other people, but we can see the chat and the Q&A. I'm seeing lots of great stuff coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, we give a heads up before the next activity. Give early reminder, good, 5 to 10 minute warnings. We use songs. I see lots of songs, that's great. Kids love music.
Choices within, I love it.
Yes, love that. Focus on the child's interest, stand timers, we ring the bell. Yeah, the daily visual schedule. This is great. I love this. This is like, I can't even keep up with this. There's so many great suggestions. I love this. Warnings, using the visual schedule, music, verbal warnings. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to, you can continue to put that in if you want. I'll just expand on some of that. So there are so many different things that you can do. You know, there's ways to get the children's attention first before you're even giving that transition warning. So sometimes it's like hands on top, and the kids say that means stop. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. So even just doing that call and response gets their attention, so that then you can give that transition warning, because a lot of times I've seen, you know, the transition warning is given, but not everybody heard it. So then they're upset because they didn't know it was time to clean up. And you go, well, I gave a warning. So we want to make sure we're getting their attention in the first place. You know, using those visuals, I love seeing that so many of you were using those visuals. It's great to take that visual and go around and again, make sure that children are hearing and seeing 5 more minutes and then clean up. So you can turn off the lights to get the children's attention. Usually I recommend turn the lights off to get their attention, give your message, then turn the light back on. We want to avoid on, off, on, off, on, off for the visual sensitive children. So, and the songs, the use of songs are great. So using, like, you guys have so many ideas here, which is fantastic. And so the nice thing is that you can change that up, because if you do the exact same thing every time, eventually kids are going to kind of tune out to that. So it's something that you can change up, make fun. It kind of forces them to have to pay attention, because they don't know necessarily what to expect, versus when it's the same way to get their attention, or the same kind of transition warning or whatnot every time. Maybe you change the cleanup song every couple of months or something. So So the different transition strategies also support different types of learners. So some kids really need that auditory, right? They need to hear that timer or that bell. Lots of people are visual, so they really need to see that first we're going to clean up and then we're going to go outside. You know, where the hands on top, that's a visual as well, right? So even if they didn't hear the hands on top, they can see the teachers and all the kids doing that as well. So they can get that cue from just observing. All right. So then we talk about shared expectations. So this is the common one we use at GRIT. We are kind, we are safe, we are respectful. This, I always would say to educators, this is, I just think, how we should be as people in the world, whether you're an adult or a child. We should be kind, we should be safe, we should be respectful. So our expectations are kind of that overarching what we expect, like I said, of just people to be. And then within each of those expectations, there are rules. So, you know, we are safe is the expectation. The rule would be we wash our hands before we eat, because that keeps us safe, it keeps the germs, right? We're respectful. The rule is that we are listening when someone is talking, for example. So we want to make sure that we are stating those rules, because we know that the rules change. The expectations don't, but the rules change. So we are safe in the room, in the house rather, in your family childcare program, it might be using walking feet. But when you go outside, whether it's to the park or the backyard, the safe might be that, yes, you can run, but you are watching where you are running. So the rules change depending on who you're with, where you're at, what elements of the environment you're interacting with. We want to make sure we're phrasing those positively. We all will think of what we hear or what we see. So if I say, don't think of a pink elephant, you're of course thinking of a pink elephant. So if we say don't hit, especially for our neurodiverse learners, they maybe only heard the hit part. And so now they're hitting. So we want to tell children what to do rather than what not to do. And sometimes that can be a little tricky. So you get creative. You know, I've had people say, well, how do you say no spitting? Keep your saliva in your mouth, right? Like sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge, but getting used to phrasing that positively, telling them what you want them to do. Because often what will happen is if we just say, you know, don't hit, well, we didn't tell them what to do instead. So now they're deciding to bite, right? So we definitely don't want them choosing the alternative, but if you tell them what to do, it's probably going to be something that is a good expectation, right? So we want to make sure we post that visually. Again, going back to visuals keep that information permanent. We all will forget things. If we have it up there, it's a constant reminder, you know, even if we're not standing there looking at the picture or reading something, it's a constant reminder. And when we do really need that reminder, it's there. So it's again, sort of like those speed limit signs, you know, it's that good reminder. Oh yeah, what's the speed limit? Okay, right. And it does communicate those shared expectations. These are the expectations of how I need to treat other people and the things in my environment, especially in your homes. This is your home. You want to make sure that people are being safe and respectful in the space with the toys or the items. And I totally lost my train of thought, but it'll come back. So the having it posted, that was the other part. See, I knew it would come back. Is that having that visual, it's a reminder of this is how I need to treat other people and things, but this is also how other people should be treating me as well. And then as an educator, you can use the visual posts to review and remind. And these are great to review at transitions, right? Okay, so we're gonna go outside. So remember, when we are going outside, we are gonna stay safe by holding hands when we walk. We are respectful by keeping our hands to ourselves when we're playing. We are kind, we are using please and thank you, or whatever your rules are. So it helps you to remember to review those as well. And it's great to have the kids involved and coming up with those rules. Obviously, it depends on the age, but they feel that sense of ownership as well if they have had a chance to come up with, these are our rules, these are our expectations. So
especially if there are rules to accommodate a child, like, you know, we're quiet because it overstimulates a child with autism. They're also learning that empathy piece when they come up with that, like, how can we help Johnny feel safe during this noisy part of the day, right? It's a way to address some of those diverse needs in a really respectful way that involves the children.
Yes, thank you, Gina. Yeah, absolutely. All right, one of my favorite topics, emotional literacy. So there is so much involved with emotional literacy. For lots of people, that term is even new. So emotional literacy is the ability to recognize feelings in yourself as well as others. And so little children are constantly learning this. I feel like there are so many adults who are still learning this about themselves or others. But when children can recognize those feelings in themselves or in others, it can help to reduce some of the frustration and challenging behavior. So, you know, kids, they're still learning a lot. And we have lots of expectations. Lots of times we're expecting them to be like little mini adults. They have these big feelings. They don't necessarily understand them all. They don't know how to express them. They don't know how to solve their problems. So there's lots of ways that we can support this emotional literacy process. You know, the slide that you see, those are just some ideas, right? There's lots of books on feelings. There's some great movies, right? The Inside Out movies are fantastic. Just labeling emotions, talking about feelings or emotions, practicing role play that might be with people or it might be with toys, play. So we have these awesome blank faces on laminated mats, and we give kids Play-Doh and they get to make the emotions on faces. Like, there's so many things. I love the feeling check-ins where kids can identify how they're feeling. There's songs, and then co-regulation. So for those who don't know, or this is a new term, co-regulation is that process of regulating together. So kids about age 7, 8, grade 1, grade 2, you know, average, they're starting to be able to self-regulate on their own, so regulate their own emotions. So we really need to be able to model that to the kids, and we do that by regulating with them. So we see somebody frustrated, we take a big breath with them and we guide them through that, or whatever it is that we're going to do to support that child. So we want to co-regulate with them to help them regulate their bodies, but in the same time, we are modeling for them, this is something that you can do. And that's its whole other thing, co-regulation. But there's so many different things, and it's very personal. Everybody has different things that they prefer, and every moment is different. So
we have, if this is of interest, we have a free, Grit has a free workshop on emotional literacy and regulation next week. I can send the link to Robin maybe for further follow-up for those who are interested. But I also wanted to add in that doing all of these emotional literacy things, it also just normalizes it. So when a child does have a meltdown, it's not scary to anyone else. It's like, okay, yeah, he's upset because he's learning, or you know, lost his words, and it becomes no big deal, right? It happens less often, but it also is less stressful.
Yes, and thank you for adding that, because it's also then important to know that that the kids learn we have emotions too as adults, right? It's not just about the kids, right? That's also how we're modeling that emotional literacy piece. Oh, I'm feeling frustrated because I'm looking for something and I cannot find it, right? We are modeling for them in that moment. I have feelings too, and this is how I can express it, and this is how I can help regulate myself. So it does normalize that. It's not just, oh, only kids have feelings and adults don't. We definitely do. Okay, so then we go to peer interaction skills. So this is a big one too in terms of inclusion. Again, the social dynamic and those social skills, they are difficult because they're not black and white. It really does depend on where you are, who you're with. And so there's so many aspects to it, like getting someone's attention, asking to take a turn, or sharing, helping each other, leading and following. Some kids like to always dictate the play. You know, making comments, complimenting, encouraging, right? And in the beginning, kids, it's very much like give and take. Like it's like, I want this, but there's other interactions that are just commentary, right? You can do it. Oh, I like what you made, right? And empathy. So, you know, understanding that, oh, someone's feeling a certain way and I can express my feelings about how they're feeling or try to make them feel better. They're not going to master these at a young age. Their brains are just developing. So they're going to need a lot of adult support. So again, we can do these things and model for children so that they start learning these skills, and not just through modeling. Lots of times we do have to intentionally practice. So sometimes it's setting a situation up so that they can practice those skills, just like you would tying your shoes. So some ways that you can support that with kids: you can have lineup buddies. You can have older kids helping younger kids. You can have kids serve each other meals, right? They're helping each other. Or you have a greeting song in a large group. Maybe it's your circle time or whatnot. That helps foster those connections between different kids, helps them feel like we're all here together. So really easy things. Kids love to be helpers. They love to feel like little mini teachers. So getting them involved with helping each other is a really great strategy that often it is just a little bit and it has a big reward. So if you have helpers, so if there's a child with a disability, make sure that the child with the disability also gets a helper role, right? We don't want to have what we'll say neurotypical children helping the child with a disability all the time. It can create that perspective of there's something wrong with that child. They are, you know, they're a baby or whatnot. So make sure that when you're thinking of those helper roles, that everyone is able to help each other. Okay, so how can we do this in play? So there's lots of books about friendship. We can have activities that require at least 2 people. So again, you can set something up that's intentionally meant for kids to work together. I love to set up activities where I split pieces, and this child has these pieces and this child has these pieces, and then they have to work together to create, you know, something. They need each other, right? Versus, oh, I'm gonna have my Lego and you're gonna have your Lego. So thinking about how you can intentionally plan for things like that. Games, puppet role plays, or, you know, you can do dolls, or there's so many different toys you can do role playing with. I mean, tons of ideas. Literally, we could just sit here all night talking about tons and tons of ideas. Obviously, we can't, but I love in the chat, we have a helper of the day, and that person counts their friends at circle. They give soap to them when it's time to wash up. Love that. Kids love being helpers. So yeah, I actually, I'll add to this really quick. I was coaching in an out of school care, and the program had the older kids, so the older elementary kids, be like little mini I can't remember what they called them because it was a few years ago, but like little mini leaders, and they actually had the visuals on them. So the educators all had their lanyards or their coil bracelets with visuals, and they gave the grade, I think it was the grade 6 kids or the grade 5 kids, and they had their own visuals too, supporting everybody. So it's a great strategy. Okay, problem solving. This is a complex process for young kids, and it's a critical life skill. So we're going to watch this video, and we're going to, hopefully it should work. We're going to watch this educator working through a problem with a group of children. And just think about how is she supporting the child that has some communication and sensory needs to solve the problem.
Yeah, so Robin's actually going to step in and take over screen sharing because she got the video to work. My computer doesn't want to. Assuming Robin's still there.
Here I am. Just trying to change the presenter. Find my name in here. Somehow I can't do that for some reason. Change presenter. Oh, that's really odd. It worked when we tested this out, I want to tell everybody, but for some reason now that everyone's viewing me.
I'll see if I can make you presenter because now I'm an organizer. Where are you?
Right.
There we go. Our 400 people. Oh my goodness.
I know, that's the problem I had.
Thank you for your.
Yes, we appreciate that.
I don't know. Oh, it's gone. I can't.
Oh, I
There
think
you
I
go.
might have done it.
Yep.
Okay. And you can hear me, so I'm going to press go and see it. Fingers crossed. We'll see how this works.
Pick first, and then right, and then the next one like this, and like pink.
So were we having a problem, or were we able to solve it? What?
I'm trying to figure out if I can. I'm trying to figuring what color all of you like, and I kind of need them to speak a little bit louder.
All right, and maybe if we talk one friend at a time, would that be helpful too, Lucy?
Could you guys talk one friend at a one time? So one person goes first, then it's okay.
Okay, so who would like to go first?
Then I can.
Okay, Lucy.
So which color do you like? Gold or red? Rainbow.
You like the rainbow one?
Okay, now Hunter's turn. I like gold and rainbow.
Oh, so you like both choices?
Yeah. I was thinking which one do you like? Which color? I really like pink. Okay, I don't need a color.
Wow. Girls, I am so impressed. Look how each one of you took your turns. Lucy, was your body feeling calm in your ears here? Great job. And you were all happy because you all were able to tell your turn. So it looks like, Lucy, you're going to keep your rainbow owl today. Here's everyone. But Lucy, which one do you like too? Because it's your shirt.
Hopefully I like the gold.
Okay, so if all of your friends like rainbow, but if it's your shirt and you like gold more, you could change it to gold too. Or you could even take turns.
Sebastian Maniscalco. My wife and I went to go see Hamilton on Broadway. It Ain't Right Tour 2024. Oh my God, it is amazing. We saw it.
Okay. There I am. Sorry about that. So we can switch back.
Perfect. Okay.
Here we go.
So thank you. Thanks, Robin. All right. So we're going to kind of debrief on the next slide. So we're going to debrief the video quickly using the next slide, the problem solving process. So we go, there we go. So hopefully you noticed that the educator, she had some visuals and what she had were different solutions. So again, using those visual supports. And so trying to teach children the process of problem solving. So to think about, what is the problem? How is it making me feel? So just, name it to tame it kind of thing. Think of a solution, and it may not be the solution that works. It may not even be an appropriate solution, but we're just starting that process. What would happen? Give it a try. So, and that giving it a try, and then sometimes we learn that solution didn't work. So that's problem solving in and of itself. You don't give up after the first attempt. Go back to those other solutions you thought of and give that a try. So I'm just like speeding up a little bit because I realize we're just about done here. So if I'm talking fast, sorry, I'm doing it intentionally, but that process took less than 2 minutes, that educator to support those children solving the problem, and they were all involved with it. So that's what I love, is that they got to be part of it.
And I think what is like that the kids don't even recognize is that little girl there was some anxiety, she had some hearing impairment, right? Like she did have some diverse learning needs and was still able to go through this process in a way that was inclusive.
Yeah. All right, so we are not going to dive into this, but I will tell you about our routine-based support guide. It is an amazing resource, and it kind of gives different options for possible reasons for a behavior. It also then gives you some proactive, so some prevention strategies. It gives you a way to respond differently when that behavior occurs, and gives you ideas about what's a skill to teach the child. So for example, child doesn't like or want to go to the next activity. You can see in that sort of second column, the biggest box, there's a whole bunch of proactive strategies. That's where we want to put most of our efforts, is those proactive strategies. So it's like, here's some ideas you can try to stop that behavior in the first place. The next one, here's how you can respond when that happens, if the child is refusing to move on to the next activity, and then what skill might need to be taught, because often it's a lack of skill in some area that the child does not yet have that is contributing to that challenging behavior. So teaching a child to make a choice, teaching a child to imitate a peer. So this resource is a fantastic one, and it goes through tons of different routines that you would come across throughout your day.
Yeah, and I'll mention too, so there's sample pages in your workbook of transition, but we will send the full routine-based support guide. I'm going to send that to Robin as well. It's a PDF, but it's like 45 pages, but it's kind of like a cookbook. So you can think like, gosh, this child's struggling with this routine, and go through that to be like, what might be missing? Yeah.
It's great. If you don't have access to a behavior consultant, it's like a replacement for me.
It really is. It really is. I apologize, we don't have time to explore it, but I'm really glad we focused on some of those nuts and bolts strategies, because when you put those in place, you'll only need the routine-based support guide for 1 or 2 children, and it won't feel like you need it for all of them.
Exactly. The idea with those strategies that we talked about, the transition strategies, the behavior expectations, the visuals, the problem solving, the emotional literacy, if you are incorporating that into your family day home, family childcare, I lost the word. Gina, help me out.
Family childcare, I think is the generic term. We call them day homes out here.
Yes.
So
thank you. That's going to typically reduce or eliminate about 80% of the challenges that you may have with some kids and their behaviors. So putting your efforts into those strategies where it helps everybody does go a long way. And I love this quote, if a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way they learn, Ignacio Estrada. So
yeah. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you. I mean, that was wonderful. So much information. We really appreciate that. So many things to think about. And I know there might be some questions coming through, so I'll give that a moment just to see if anybody's got some additional comments. And there'll be lots coming out in your follow-up email, so not to fear, there's going to be some resources and some links, and that important link to that webinar you mentioned, the workbook and all those other treasures you mentioned would be great. So we will send those along in the follow-up email, and that will probably come within 2 days of this event, as well as your certificates. Your certificates will also come for attending this live event, and they'll come within 2 days as well. I know there are just only 2 or 3 people last time that had an issue about their certificate. And just so you know, going forward, because we do have another webinar coming up on November 27th with Gina, you need to register yourself for the webinar, and it's free and it's really hassle-free. It's not a big deal, but we encourage you to register yourself, so then you're sure to get the follow-up email and the certificate, because they're auto-generated from our site for the attendees. So if you share a link with your friends, often your name might get lost in the shuffle. So just be sure that when you get the link out for the next one, your friend, instead of sending you the link, send them the registration link, and then use that, please, to put your own name and your own email address into the system, so then you don't get lost in the shuffle or fall through the cracks or anything, because we want everyone to receive all these wonderful additional resources and your certificates too. Is there anything else anybody wanted? I'm just flipping through the questions there. So thanks again, Gina and Kim, for sharing all your expert knowledge. Suzanne, is there anything you wanted to share at the end?
No, I think what a amazing webinar. Like, I could have sat for another hour easily.
We could have
Yes.
too, but we recognize that some people are in like the Maritimes in Newfoundland and it's bedtime.
Yeah.
It's late. Yeah, late in Ottawa too, for sure. But thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to November 27th, where we'll be getting together again for another webinar, and hope you can join us.
It all back, tying it all together, and living this out day to day.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, and let's hope everybody goes forward and use some of your tips tomorrow in their practice. That would be great. Thanks so much.
Have a good rest of your week, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.